never read your parents' diaries, don't do it. It's a bad idea.
Hey, welcome back to the All In Podcast with Rick Jordan. I'm here with Shiggi, again, part 2. If you didn't hear part 1, listen to it because we really dove into the deep of suicide, and I'm excited to expand on Shiggi's story today. What's shaking, Shiggi?
I'm good. It's good to be back. It's there's a lot to cover, apparently, when it comes to being on the other side of suicide bereavement.
For sure. We left off and we talked post-show about your journey with your mom and getting to the States, but everything you went through there. But then also we didn't really touch on your trip back to Kenya. So jump in wherever you want in that part of the story, and let's go from there.
Sure. So I think just a little bit of a kind of catch up moment. In the midst of all of the emotional turmoil and having to go and deal with a dead person's affairs, effectively. Right before I went to the States to go deal with everything, I did tell my uncle, like, you are dealing with the Kenya bit. Because I knew already, I'm born and raised Kenyan. I don't sound Kenyan or African, if there's such a thing, at all. All right, I probably sound more British than anything else, but then I have a slight American twang. So the association with Kenya isn't even that big when you just look at me. But I lived there until I was 15 years old. So, there is a lot that I understand and there's a lot that I observe. And being away from all of that, I know there is no way I can go back and try and just pretend like I'm a local.
Yeah, it's interesting even at 15 that you would know that, because I can equate a little bit to being 16 and my dad passing, and there's so many memories, and it's more like is it more like emotions for you? Because it is for me that you remember those parts. You have memories, but real memories where you can see things, but it's more like the emotions and you can feel what the people were like. You still carry that with you.
Yeah. So that's kind of the main thing that I had. And the few times I did go back, gotta love local people and their brashness. They're like, you're a foreigner. And I'm like, I'm Kenyan. They're like, no, you're a foreigner. You can't even speak Swahili. I'm like, yeah, but like, I'm still one of you. Like, there's that kind of whole understanding. Like, I accepted what they were saying because it's true in one sense. But my grandmother, before she passed, she said, like, it doesn't matter how far away you are from home, you're still Kenyan, and I've always held on to that, as opposed to people saying like, oh, you sound different, therefore you're not one of us. So with that, having that armor, that added on to my armor of understanding, when I left to go to the States to go deal with my mom, I did tell my uncle, because he wanted to come with me, and I'm like, I can't mother you. I just need to mother myself. I'm doing this on my own. Your duty is to deal with the Kenyan stuff because I'm female, right? And unfortunately, there is this whole, I suppose, lead or push of a patriarchal kind of head of the spear, being female, being the eldest female born. There's always this look for where's the man, where's the son, where's the man of the family, and it's like, me. You're dealing with, I am the man of the family. And I understood that. And I didn't want to deal with the headache that would be constantly reminding people, like, you're dealing with me. There is no man in this family. I am the man and the woman and the eldest. And she's my mother. Like, I didn't want to deal with all of that on top of having to deal with my mother short herself. So I told my uncle, I'm going to be away for 3 weeks. By the time I come over, I am just a numb, urn holder. I think that's where we kind of left off on the last episode. So that's basically, I set that tone with him. And credit to him, he took it on board and he just carried on doing his thing, asked me what I was doing, told him this is what's going on, and we kind of just liaised and organized things as a, I suppose, army, bringing someone home. And flying back from the States with my mother in my backpack was quite a weird, surreal thing to have. and I don't know if I mentioned this as well, with flying from the States. So this is from Atlanta in Georgia. You know, there's the whole Southern hospitality thing, which I hugely appreciated whilst I was out there. Being in the airport, everyone was just so patient and so kind and just really looked out for me. Because, you know, having a travel urn, not even just a normal one, you have to have a very specific flight people approved urn, right?
That's where my brain was going. I remember my son getting this like sand kit or something like that on a vacation, and they thought it was some sort of like plastic explosive component or something. So there's a travel urn?
Yep. Yeah. So whilst I was at the crematorium, it was a conversation that I had because, you know, my dark humor, as twisted and sick as it can be sometimes, is actually a really good driver for exploring places that I'm not sure about, but I feel maybe I should kind of like say something. So I did mention, like, I am taking my mother home in my backpack. What do I need to do anything special? And because I've actually been trained up in scanning, airport style scanning. I used to be a security person. I used to do physical security, which included doing the airport style scanners and being able to read them. So I can read, airport style x-rays of stuff. And I know having something like an urn with this, it'll end up being like a very light gray, like nondescript shape thing in there. People will have to take that out and open it. And I'm like, I don't want my mom's dust everywhere. So like, how do I stop that from happening? And the guy there, he was fine. He's just like, oh, you need a travel urn. And I'm like,
as if it's like just a normal everyday thing.
Yeah, I mean, they've clearly dealt, like, they were really, really good. They've clearly dealt with all sorts, and they did say they've dealt with a lot of African funerals.
Oh, wow.
Where they've had to deal with full bodies. Like I'm an easy case where my mum got cremated. They had to kind of deal with full caskets and, you know, exporting, you know, the body and doing all of that stuff. So my situation was easier for them.
Where was your mind at when you start talking about the different types of urns that you have to have? Because I remember you talking, and it was dark humor. It was really funny. While you're saying, he's like, "There's my mom in a box." You know, I remember that from last time. But yeah, how does that conversation go? And where's your head at?
I don't know. It was a weird kind of matter of fact situation where I have, you know, I suppose my brain kind of went slightly warfare-ish, kind of going like, there's a payload and I need to make sure it gets delivered safely. You know, that's part of my thinking. And the other part of me is just like, but what if we have to transfer like her dust from one thing to another with a cup? So there's part of me that's just like,
cup? What?
No, but this you asked the question.
I know, and I did, but why a cup?
I don't know, like some kind of chalice or I don't like a Viking horn. Like that's what my brain did. It's just like, what if I have to like do the switching and they just give me this like basic box or a plastic bag and like I have to do the things and like, you know, what if like she turns into dust and she goes up my nose and I sneeze and like just it was a mess. My mind was an absolute mess. But I let the kind of warlord take the front because the child in the back was just going, I don't know what to do with this. What if she's dusty? And, you know, that's what I have. I have a child mentality. There wasn't really room or an opportunity for feeling sadness or pain because there wasn't any. I was already exhausted by, I think at the time it had been at least 10 days worth of me, you know, going all over the place, having to go and claim her body, you know, at the morgue, you know, and dealing with the various police officers and all the phone calls and going back and forth from the apartment and never read your parents' diaries. I think I mentioned that as well. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. She wrote a lot about me. I read a lot about me.
Was that during the 10 days you started reading that?
Yeah. So I think it was probably day I arrived, went saw my uncle, got a whole bunch of papers and stuff. And then I think from day 5, so about 5 days worth of just me going back and forth from the apartment and then spending one day to go down and collect or claim the body. all of that, I think, was a huge emotional turmoil for me, to the point
Sure.
where
Well,
I was numb,
I can't
basically.
imagine, because I mean, there's an image that everybody projects, right? And there's only very few people, I think, in the world that anyone can come across in their path to where you feel like you can be completely open with all of your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings. You know, we'll touch on this later about finding your people, like we did before, but especially your parents, because I mean, even though I have amazing parents, you know, even with my dad dying when I was young, I'm sure everybody struggles with stuff, you know. And you've got, I can only imagine my mom when my dad passed, everything that was going through her head. So you're enlightening me now to what really goes on in that kind of turmoil. But I don't want to go back if she journaled or anything like that during that time period, because that might, we're only human, right? And that might put up a wall and change my perception of my mom. And that's really not her, because emotional turmoil can do just shitty things in your brain. I've been there.
Yeah.
You've obviously been there too. So beyond that, you know, beyond just saying, don't read that stuff, what else can you do to process those emotions in those times?
Well, so, it initially, it was like, one of those really intense books you feel you shouldn't be reading, but you just can't stop, because there's something in the back of your head that's just like, more, more, more. I need to understand. I need to grasp. And you fool yourself. You're doing this for science, for understanding behavioral psychology of your mother. And you're just like, no,
Oh,
you're not.
so you were
You
just
just
trying
want
to justify. Yeah, I got you.
yeah. But at the same time, part of me is going, I'm not a bad person. Like that's my whole thing, my whole life mantra. If you wanted to kind of double condense it down to just that, I'm not a bad person, is my whole thing. I just don't want to be a bad person. And that diary was going against that. The whole, like, every single line was just, I know she was just very angry. She lived a very, very hard life, a very tough life. She was on her own. She was let down so much, so much by everyone, including my stepfather, including my biological father, including her grandfather, her father, my grandfather, her mother. She was sent to boarding school in another country at the age of 12, So she's been through a lot. And after the first day of reading through all of that and just literally feeling like the tiniest piece of crap on someone's heel.
Wow.
A friend of mine told me, like, no, you need to shred these. And I'm like, okay, fine. But she's like, no, but I'm like, okay, I need to go. But like I still have my own little thing that I need to do with that is I needed to pull myself out of the books, because I don't, have you ever watched any of the Harry Potter films?
Oh yeah, all of them.
Yeah. Okay, good. Right. So when they have the precipice,
Yeah.
right? And Dumbledore kind of pulls his memories out and puts them into the bowl, essentially.
Where you can see, yeah. Yep.
Exactly. And then Harry gets stuck in, but Voldemort's down there, and he starts getting pulled into this thing properly. So it was that. I felt like, I was so stuck in to her narrative of our life that I was forgetting mine. And I had to, I reread some bits because I tore out certain pages that kind of like hurt the most. And the next day, I read those and I gave myself the question, is it true? And this is something one of my psychotherapists gave me a long time ago, because we were talking about lived experiences. And your lived experience and my lived experience of the same situation are both valid. If you felt a certain way,
right,
if you saw things that way, if you did all of that, that's fine. The things and the way I saw stuff as well from the same situation, they're both correct. There's no wrong, right? So I used that is it true kind of aspect, and I read these things and I went, is it true? For her, it was. And for me, it wasn't, because this is how I had it. And I can see where the commonalities were, kind of recalling my own experience of her experiences. I could fill in the gaps. And I think that was the problem, was I was seeing her situation and kind of going, no, that's not how it happened. It's wrong. Like, the 5-year-old is kind of freaking out. So I did that with 4 or 5 incidences. There were a lot of incidences, but I did that with some of the younger ones and then some of the more recent ones. And then just went, okay, I'm done. That's it. And then I just shredded everything else. There's like 4 or 5 other diaries, and I'm just like, nope, nope. I'm not reading any of them. because I understand where my mother was, what she's been through. I had a better picture as a result, but ultimately, she's done her thing. I now need to do my duty, which is just take her home. So yeah, kind of being in the office with my mum on the table, I was exhausted. There's literally no more emotional output from the child. The child was now just kind of doing stupid jokes, and all I had left was my militant aspect of me that just needs to get the job done. So that's why, I was asking if I'm traveling. Like, I don't particularly want to have to start, transferring her with a cup between two urns. Like, is there something that you guys can do before she gets cremated? And they said, oh yeah, we can put her in a travel urn. And like the security person to me is like, what's the difference? What's going on? And he said, it's a fully sealed case, and it has a certificate on it that allows it to travel, and the inside of it is treated in such a way that any airport security searching unit will notice that there's the guy there has to put a coin underneath it so that you can see the coin through the box. So they don't put a coin inside the box. They just put it sits in its own tray. They put a coin there, and the box sits on top of that, and nothing else is allowed to touch it. So that's how it gets through an X-ray machine. And obviously the person seeing the operator of the machine will have to tell, one of the other security operatives that this is a specific thing that needs to now go to be swabbed with a specific kind of chemical that they use to make sure that there's no like bomb dust on it or drug dust or any, like, they have a whole kit, right? And you have to stand there with them. They won't move it without, you being there with them at the same time. So it's a very step-by-step controlled process that they do. And they're lovely. Like, through all of it, there was one guy who didn't quite know what was going on. And he's like, what's this? I'm like, my mother. And he's like, what? And I'm like, you're holding my mom. And he was like, he had gloves on. And he's looking at, like, that. There's, I've got pictures, but there was like literally the certification, kind of stamp was on the front of it. It's just a black, like, box. There's nothing fancy about it. And I'm exhausted. I'm just like, you're holding my mom. And the guy is just like, what do you mean? I'm like, the box has my mother inside it, and it's in your hands. That's what you're holding. Like, this is what I was saying. I was so tired, but clearly dark humor was still working. And he just started having this like look of panic. And then I just started looking at someone else kind of going, hi. Like he doesn't know what's going on, and I don't have the energy to like entertain this. So this other guy comes over, old dude, clearly knows exactly what's going on. He's like, so who's this? And I'm like, oh, it's my mother. He's like, my condolences. And like he just rolls into it and just does everything. And he teaches the guy, this is what you need to do. And yeah, at the end there was another lady, again an older black lady. So these were two black people, by the way, who were helping me out. And the other one guy, I think he was Mexican or something, which was interesting just to see how gentle and loving everyone was with the process. Like, there was no hardships or anything, and everyone just kind of just turned it down a little bit, like, because they could see how exhausted I was.
It's interesting. I mean, there's two things I'm hearing in your story, at least this part of it. And the first is, we'll start with the TSA people, right? Or the security people. And there's times to where I feel, because I travel a lot, that some of them like to go on a power trip, right? And you see that. But in a moment like this, it's extremely encouraging because everybody is still human at their heart. Even though who knows, why are they on the power trip that day? Maybe there were some idiots that were going through the line. I mean, I'm always saying hi, I'm always waving, because their job's got to suck, because they probably have some idiots that just go through security and just yell at them. I mean, literally yell at them. I've seen it happen. So what's going on in their day? But something like this happens, and it's like immediately they're back to, hey, I'm a person in this moment. And here's another person that's going through a time, and I just need to be a human in this moment. I'll do my job, but at the same time, I can bring humanity back into today, into this 2 minutes. The second thing, and I'm relating to this, is this war mode that you're in, of just getting the job done. And when my dad passed, it was the same thing for me, because I had younger brother and younger sister that I was raising for 2 years. And it really was that for me for just that 2 years. I mean, I would drive them to school after I got them up dressed, and then I would drive to school myself, but then I would drive myself to work. I was working full time, and then I would get home and I might play a little bit of Xbox at that time, or I think it was Nintendo 64 at that time. And that was it. It was like wash, rinse, and repeat. And that was the emotional state. And you'd have that child that would pop up every now and then to where you could think you could have fun for a moment. But then you sort of suppress that child back down because you have a job to do. You have to get through these next 10 days or these next 2 years. And you put your head down and you just go through it because that's what you're supposed to do. I'm the oldest also. I get that. I was the man of the house, and I'm here. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It seems like this always falls on the oldest when this happens, and you just put your head down and you just plow through it because that's what you're supposed to do. Did you feel like everybody in the world was just like depending on you?
I'm an extroverted introvert, right? So, I DJ and I do all this stuff outside, and I can be the life of the party. I can hold a room and, do all these things, but please leave me the hell alone. Do not call me. And during this entire time, my phone was blowing up. And some days I just switched my phone off because I'm like, what is this? I don't like it. To me, it did feel like everyone was asking me questions and looking for answers. And the problem with that, like with me and my childhood with my mom, is I was never really allowed to ask my mom questions. She's like, there's an Oxford dictionary over there. There's a medical dictionary over there. There's a 1,001 things you need to know about the sea over there. Literally, she just bought books with all the answers in it. And I had to go and find the answers. I was never allowed to ask a question and be told a simple answer. So when Google came around, I was like, oh my God, finally.
Yay!
I don't have to touch it ever again. I can just tell people to Google the thing, but I still, people ask me questions. I'll still endeavor to find answers. So with that situation with my mom, I didn't know what I was doing. I guessed. Like I typed things in Google and it gave me lots of answers that weren't like relevant until page 62, where there was this little blog post about someone who had to deal with being a foreigner and trying to claim like a dead body, and all that kind of stuff. And they made it out to be really complicated. It wasn't that complicated at all because I looked like my mom and she thankfully didn't destroy her face. So it did feel like everyone was asking me questions and was expecting from me. Which I'm used to having. Like everyone always expects stuff from me all the time. And sometimes I'll step up to the plate. Most times I'll just tell people no, because I've learned that no is a thing.
Yeah,
you can say no
is actually quite okay.
It is very okay. And it's a full sentence as well. So,
yeah, it is.
No, but no, just no.
No
just
is a full sentence.
Yes. So with all of it, I kind of took what I needed to take on board. When people did ask me questions, I'll be like, I don't know, but give me 2 days and I'll figure it out, or this is what I'm searching. Can you go and search that at the same time? So, two heads are searching at the same time. If you find anything that you feel is relevant, send it back to me and then we can have a discussion, so I literally turned into an event manager. I've been a security event manager for 12 something years or whatever. So my brain did, like you're saying, like it just defaulted into, this. I have a lot of places that I don't understand. Like there's nothing there, but as and when it becomes a relevant kind of query and it's the next step that I need to take, then I will take this and I will figure out how to build a brick, build my next brick. And that's literally how the whole process was on the American side. And there was a bit of foresight, kind of looking ahead into the world of Kenya. Because like I said, like if I had to lead it, I would have all these stumbling blocks that I already know existed. And I know that I'm going to be mentally and physically exhausted. I don't want any of it because there will be slip ups, so why should I lead that aspect when I have my family who've, popped out of nowhere, my Kenyan side of the family, who have said, what do you need us to do? I'm like, deal with the Kenyan stuff. You're Kenyan, you do the thing. Like, do it. I don't even want to know what you're doing. All I want to know is when I arrive tell me where to go, tell me where I put my mother, and then I'm going home. Like, that's how kind of just like the Jewish aspect of me kind of popped up. Like my stepdad just basically popped up. Like, what needs to get done? What
Something
do you need me
tells
to
me
do?
That's not exactly how it happened when you arrived, though.
It didn't. Mostly because, again, I refused to see a lot of stuff. And I took advantage of the assumed ignorance that local people have because I'm a foreigner. So I took advantage of that in a very tactical way. Because weirdly enough, when you're back in your home country for long enough, the language starts turning into a native thing where you actually understand the freaking words that are coming out of people's mouths. Flying over, the American hospitality was amazing. The British hospitality in the airports was different. And again, in the previous episode, I think the first thing I mentioned about the stereotypical British demeanor is when you're emotional, they will just give you all the space you need. All right, they're just like, oh, you're being emotional. There, old chap, just stiff up a lip, and then they move on. So in the airports, I was exhausted. The queues were hugely long. Just going through passport checks. I stayed at home for a bit, for like a couple of hours before my transfer, because I wanted to get rid of all the suitcases I had, which were all overweight, by the way, by about 15 to 20 kilos, and I didn't get charged for any of them. So more
because
compassion.
People are human. Yeah, exactly.
I didn't even realize. The woman was just talking to me, and she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Like, like she just doing everything. I'm just there, kind of going, "I just want to sit down." She's like, "I understand. Here's your ticket." And literally, as I got to the UK, I looked at my ticket properly, and I had 3 stickers for my suitcases, and they were all overweight. And I'm like, "That's like what, $200 or something, or however much it is." And she just didn't say a word. I'm like, "Oh, that's amazing." Yeah, the British airport staff are just very kind of like, they don't care. Well, it's not that they don't care. They don't have to care. They just care enough to get the job done. Where they're like, sorry to hear that, love. My auntie's still on my mantelpiece. You just have to keep on going in that queue. It should only be another 25 minutes. I'm just like, all right, thanks.
Wow, that's matter of fact.
Yeah. Which is, I understand it because I've lived in England for 20 odd years, but at the same time, I was just kind of like very stark, very, very night and day kind of, and yeah, I looked at that and I just went, it's a bit clinical, it's a bit heartless. I get it, but could have said anything else. You could have, maybe been like, I'm really, really sorry. Unfortunately, I haven't got any wiggle room. I can't put you into that queue. It's another 20 minutes. I'm really sorry. I hope, you're doing okay. If you need a drink of water or something, like, just go out and you can come back into the queue at the same point. Something like that. Maybe. No, none of that. But I was so exhausted. I just observed the situation and then just kind of shuffled along with everyone else. So the UK, that stark kind of airport experience between the two was interesting. And then getting to Kenya was pretty straightforward. By then I'd already had a nap and I'd eaten some food and changed clothes and just had a carry on with 5 days worth of change of clothes, and then they could be washed. And my mum. All in my backpack. 5 days of clothes and my mother. I did actually buy a biodegradable purple urn that I wanted to transfer her into. So still the kind of the child in me was just kind of like, oh, we're going to like dust and everything. People didn't seem to care. And the scanning in the UK, they didn't, I left it in my bag. I was just like, let's see what happens. Nothing at all. I don't know if that's a good thing to say or not, but I'm pretty sure they've picked up, their scanning and everything. But yeah, it was a very different experience to get back to Kenya. And then my Kenyan family basically looked after me. I told them, I was messaging them on the way back. I'm like, I am exhausted. I have 0 brain power. Please cover everything and just tell me what I need to do. I am literally a zombie right now. So through the messages and through my uncle kind of just telling me he had to lead the conversations with the elders and everything. So I kind of slightly alluded to our family is quite involved, in the Kenyan governmental space. You know, my uncle had a lot on his plate, you know, just being kind of quite a public figure, as it were. And with the passing of my grandmother, more so, there was a lot more of a kind of song and dance around it because she was a very important woman to the president of at the time, um, and the local village. She was the woman of the village, right? So my grandmother's funeral, we had, I think we had 400 people at the chapel on the first day, and then maybe almost 1,000 people at the funeral on the second day. And then there's just days and days and days of just, you know, dancing and talking. And, you know, it's a whole thing. It's a celebration of life over there, which is something I wanted to touch upon this time round. It was the cultural differences, you know, because there's a huge amount of them.
Please dive into that, because how you're talking now really inspires me. That's really how it should be. You know, yeah. I mean, there's grief and there's processing and everything, but why not focus on all the amazing things that this individual was?
Yeah. Yeah. And I always found it weird, I guess, because the first association with death I had was at the age of 2 with my grandfather passing. And I saw everyone crying and I'm like, maybe I should cry, but I don't feel like crying. Like, I don't even know who this dude was. He was a cool dude. I enjoyed the time I had with him, but I don't feel like crying. And then I started crying just because I felt like, you know, I didn't want to be the odd child out. But when my grandfather was there in an open casket, like, my mom was crying because obviously her father passed away. I'm like, Mom, why has he got cotton stuffed up his nose? Like, that was it. Like, out of his nose, because it was just, I'm like, no, he can't breathe. He's dead. But, like, you know, that was my thing. But with an open casket, you know, funeral, the body has to be presented. So with my grandmother, the same thing happened, and I still have her funeral procession book where it's literally written a celebration of life. And if you go on YouTube and you kind of do search for any kind of African funeral, there is no black, except for maybe those 4 guys that do the dancing with the casket on their shoulders, which I think is a West African thing. And it became a meme, I think, for this year or last year, where they dance and do a whole bunch of crazy moves with like this casket on their shoulders. But ultimately, it's a celebration of life. Like, we embrace and celebrate the joy and love and connection that person gave to the world and gave to the families around them. Even if there are a few issues that may have arisen, like, we focus on the good initially. Like, that's the main reason why we're all there. If that person touched a lot of people like my grandmother did, then everyone shows up, right? Everyone shows up to this, to the ceremonies, the eulogies, the talks, the hymns. Because I think my grandmother was a 7-day something to do with Christianity, 7-day later saints or something like that. I don't know. So we had the chapel and all of that in there. And we had a huge, I suppose, banquet as well. So we fed everyone who came over, which is something I don't really see in Christian funerals. Like, I unfortunately avoid Christian funerals because they're so sad. And I feel, from the experiences I've had, and I'm wringing my fingers because I feel really bad for what I'm about to say, I feel Western funerals are very selfish because they mourn the personal loss that a living person has. You know, everyone's there for their own personal reasons or their own personal attachments to the dead person. You know, so they're there to maybe cry the most, or maybe wear the most outlandish dark outfit, or, you know, whatever, or have the most outrageous arguments with everyone and blaming everyone for the reason why that person died. You know, all that kind of stuff. I don't like it because it's not part of my growing up. Like, I've never really witnessed that unless, you know, I'm overseas.
Yeah. I'm with you. From my pastoral history, I've officiated many weddings, but I've only officiated one funeral, and that was my grandmother's. I was asked to officiate hers, and this was maybe 10 years ago now, 11 years ago. But in that moment, I mean, I saw everybody, and I started injecting humor into my talk, just because I wanted to break that focus on themselves and say, let's talk about this amazing freaking woman here, you know, and telling the personal stories about how I would tell them, like, listen, because she was 93 when she passed. I mean, lived a long, amazing life. She was even bowling still 3 times a week when she was 93 years old, fully driving. And I remember having to even take her car home from the hospital. I drove it home when she passed in the hospital. and I had to back it into her garage. And there were these 2 cement pillars on both sides of her parking spot with maybe like a half an inch clearance, only like maybe a centimeter. I'm like, how did she do this? She was 93. I'm like, she did this day after day. She's a better driver than I am. And I've been through evasive driving tactics, with all the security stuff. So, but focusing on that individual is so important and celebrating. I'm like, hey, my mind went to look at all the things that she's been through in life, and I'm like, she was born in the teens, the 19 teens. And then she had the roaring 20s. And I still remember this part because it was just mind boggling to me. It's like all these amazing things she saw. And she went through the 30s and the Great Depression and World War II. And then coming out of that with the Cold War. And then the 60s with hippies and the 70s, disco. Like maybe she could have lived that. And the whole room just erupts laughing, in that moment when I just talk about disco. But it was putting the focus back on her. And I'd say, look at this amazing woman. And it was like for just 10 minutes, everyone's attention was off of themselves. And it was on this amazing woman that my grandmother was. So switching it around from people just crying in that moment, let's say, why can't we be happy? She was 93. And she was this amazing woman who I even said, listen, you can't go anywhere until you meet my kids. Until I have kids, you're not allowed to go anywhere, okay? My mom being the youngest of 7, 7 kids, I was one of the youngest cousins and grandkids that existed. So when I was 30 or something and she was 93, so there was a 63-year-old difference between the 2 of us. I mean, that's like even 2 generations in of itself for the most part, but focusing it off of yourself, and that's for the person that's going through it like you, I think it's a different story because you're the one that's like the feet on the street. You're the soldier in this moment. And even with my grandmother, I felt that even though I didn't have anything to do with the arrangements and everything, I was still delivering the talk. I was that soldier in that moment. It's like, let's get the job done. And the job in this moment is to get the attention off of oneself, like you're talking, and get it onto this amazing woman. And it sounds like the cultural differences, because Western civilization is very much this way. We all were black, I almost want to just be anti-establishment and wear like straight up purple or something like that, to the next funeral. But then what is it? Because then it's turning the attention onto me when I do something like that too. How do you break this? How do you inject a bit of Kenyan culture into a Christian funeral?
I mean, I think, if you're going to be an outlier, and I am very much an outlier in a lot of aspects of my life, when you do something and you're doing it with a cause and you're doing it with a bigger arc going forwards, the people who don't understand will see it as a peacocking event. The people who do understand will step through and understand, what you're doing. So my dad told me, as much as you can, don't wear black. And I don't. My wardrobe is mostly color. Much to the annoyance of me having to do washing and have like 10 different piles of clothes because like they can't mix. But, I have been to funerals and I have worn color, and some people have kind of come up and said, oh, maybe you should have worn black. And I'm like, but I am black. And they're just like, and I don't care. Like, I'm here for a friend. Like, I don't even know the person who's died. I'm here for a friend to be supportive to them, right? Me wearing color is part of my support package, okay? And I sometimes wear silly little brooches or whatever, and, I'm just there for that person. And I do feel, again, if there is that kind of selfishness that pulls in where people are like, you must conform to the rules, especially if the person who's passed away is a huge nonconformist anyway, or has just lived such a brilliant life, you can go in and be like, I'm respecting that person, and the colorful life they lived by being here for their last, physical moments on this planet, or metaphysical moments of this planet, being on this planet in color, because that's who they were. I remember them being colorful, so I'm keeping that memory alive. I think it's just, you just have to squeeze in and just be that person. And if no one changes, then fine, but you've stayed true to yourself. If some people understand what you're doing, and maybe you've planted a seed, and maybe, over time people realize like, hey, we don't have to all wear black and look like Grim Reapers standing over our next kill. Like, we can actually be human beings.
Yeah. Being a third culture human, Something that struck me when you went back to Kenya that you were talking about is that they were even saying, it's, well, you're not one of us. It's like, even though you are literally the same race, they're saying you're not one of us. So it was almost like, I don't even know, is it a term? Like, I don't know the term, when you're even racist against your own kind.
It's so the whole kind of internalized racism it's not even the phrase I want to use, but it's the phrase I'm going to use because I can't really, like you, I can't really find anything for the time being.
Yeah. I'm
exactly.
good at words most of the time.
It is a thing. Words are fun. It is a thing. I probably kind of push it more towards tribalism. Kind of that whole them and us versus kind of thing exists everywhere. Right, even with people who are the most inclusive, it's part of our kind of our primal DNA where the quickest way to know if you're about to die is like that familiarity. So if there isn't familiarity, instantly that's a problem. So, your initial thing is like, you're not one of me. You do that and you're just like, okay, no, you're over there. Versus if I started speaking Swahili or whatever, the next thing would be, what tribe are you from? Because we still have tribes in Kenya. So there's always a need to differentiate smoker, non-smoker. Black, white, Kikuyu, Luya, Taita, Kenyan, Ugandan. Like, there's always something that people will utilize to kind of just like either bring you in or push you away, right? Depending on what their own objectives are. So, I went home and I stayed very quiet for the most part because I just couldn't be bothered. But sometimes people would come up to me. This was before my ears started kind of like picking up on the language. And they start speaking to me in Swahili. And I'm like, I'm really sorry I don't speak Swahili. And they'd look at me. And, they'd be like, ew, she's not speaking the language that I expect to come out of her mouth. Yeah. Yeah. And I heard one person saying Wazungu. And I'm just like, mate, stop. Like, so Muzungu is white man in Swahili. All right. And I heard Wazungu, which is kind of like, they're a white person or they're a white man. And I'm just like, really? You're going to ostracize me? Like, I'm not hurting you. I just can't speak to you. Like, find someone who speaks half English and we're good. Or like maybe someone improved Google Translate because it was terrible. But, just it there was nothing there.
Here, say that again. Okay, one more time, please.
I use Google Translate a lot in Italy, and it works really, really well because it can kind of cross communicate. Sure. So you can speak in English and it throws out in like weird Italian and it goes back and forth, which is quite cool. But not in Kenya. Swahili is not quite up to par. So yeah, just hearing the kind of, whispers around me, which I suppose you could call backstabbing, but I didn't care because I'm just like, you're talking about me, but you're not talking to me. So you're clearly scared of me. You don't understand who I am, which is fine. I get that. The family lineage that I'm part of, I'm clearly a black sheep being black and queer, which is something I didn't say. I have never told anyone when I'm in that country that I'm a bisexual woman because I'll probably get killed. So,
that's true too. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm not even exaggerating.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
Profile level of things. It's just like, oh, let's go kill the foreign black witch. She's the reason why there's problems in this country. No, I'm not. Like, I'm not that important.
The foreign black witch embodies all of our problems.
Exactly. But no, just one more cat doesn't have a home. That's what happens. But yeah, so, all this kind of just this weird passive animosity due to a language barrier was there, and, kind of being outcast, and my haircut as well. Like, I've always had a weird kind of mohawk thing of some description. I have tattoos behind my ears. I have tattoos going down my neck, all of these kind of things are not conservative. And a lot of Kenya is still quite conservative, really. So having this radical, not even a radical, this liberal, black person who should be part of the cloth, but she isn't, kind of rubbed people up the wrong way. but yeah, I being over there, I just said, just do the thing. So my uncle had to deal with the village elders, even though they wanted to talk to me. But I said I don't want to. Like it's just going to be a difficult conversation, and I can't deal with it. So he did it all. Took 2 weeks of meetings to agree to let my mother to be buried in the family farm. And due to the disgrace that she brought on the family, she wasn't allowed to come through the same gate that was purposely built for my grandmother. So they just like tore
What?
a hole. Yeah, because she's divorced, right? Which they don't believe in. She's what there's a tree. Oh yeah, she's cremated as well. So they don't believe in cremation. They believe in whole body burials. And she committed suicide. So the three of many things that they don't believe in or accept or as part of their culture, she did. So, with my stepfather still being alive at the time, they were like, no, it's the man's job. It's the husband's job to bury the body, and they were like, take the body to Israel. And we're just like, no. Like they've been divorced and separated for like 15 plus years. It's not going to happen. So that's what my uncle was fighting. He was trying to bring modern things in Kenya, not even from the UK where I am or America or Israel. He was just bringing Kenyan modernity into a village life just to let us bury our, family person in our own garden. That has nothing to do with them, but they're the village elders, so there is this weird kind of respect thing that has to be done.
Religion gets in the way of humanity a lot, doesn't it?
It really does. And when most people think about religion, they only like think of the kind of secular, like Christianity, Muslim, Jewish, all those kind of sides of things. Whereas religion kind of does span into the spiritual and almost, the fabric of society in other spaces. Because you look at, the eastern side of the world, Eastern Asia, right? They don't have religion per se, but there's a lot of just spirituality kind of ingrained in their entire existence. Africa has the same, just from our tribal upbringings, but they do kind of coincide a lot with Christianity because that was forced upon us a lot by invaders and colonizers. Unfortunately, we had British people come and tell us that we weren't human and teach us how to be human, and there were slave camps. Winston Churchill had concentration camps in Kenya.
Wow,
a lot of people don't know that.
Well, you blew my mind when you said that your grandmother was Seventh-day Adventist. Yeah, that's you're talking generations ago was when all this started too.
Exactly. So, for that to kind of be embodied now and for these issues to the cross-tribal religious kind of crossing over things is tough because now we're trying to reinvent that wheel again and be like, hey, I know you didn't believe in this, but you did believe in it before. Can you go back to believing in it again, please? Like, no, but this is the way it's always been. But it hasn't, it's not that way.
Yeah.
But that happened and they just cut a hole in the fence and very sloppily walked my mother's casket through this hole in the fence, of which my mother's travel urn is in a full-bodied casket. So she's rattling around in there like a jigsaw piece, right? It's just, I'm like, this is not necessary. So I fought my uncle a little bit about this. He's like, oh, we have to have a full casket funeral. I'm just like, but why? She's in my hands. Like, we don't need anything more. Just put her in the earth, put some earth over her, say some things, and we can be done. No. Full casket, resin sprayed something, gold handles, this whole thing.
Were the dark humor. Were the casket dancers dancing around with your mother rolling around inside the thing?
There were thankfully no casket dancers for this one.
That's what I got some dark humor too, and I'm thinking about them doing whatever it is they're doing, and then all of a sudden you just hear this clanging.
No, I mean it wasn't that hilarious. It was a little bit more kind of subdued in that we had a procession that we had to do, and I held a corner, and everyone was. I think there was 8 of us holding this casket and processing from where all the talks were happening to where the burial hole was. The floor was really uneven because for some reason, I don't know why the pastor kind of took us through trees and all this kind of stuff. There was lots of uneven routes. So guys were tripping and I'm at the back. I'm not even I'm not actually like carrying the casket. I've just put my finger on it. Like, because I am so pissed off with this whole circus affair. And like, this is all unnecessary. And this is clearly my Kenyan family's side just coming out. Like, I could feel my mother's rage coming out of me because I have the same. And this is highly unnecessary. It's all very stupid. Just put her in the floor and be done with it. But no, we were walking and I've got my finger just on a little handle just to kind of make it look like I'm holding onto it. And all I can hear is because the box is actually rattling inside this. And I'm like, I can feel it hitting when it hits the corners and they're going up and they're going down and it's just sliding, full on kamikaze sliding across this entire thing. And I'm like, nobody can hear this? No, like, how? You're all believing this lie. You're all into it. You know, my aunties, my uncles, everyone knows because I told them, right? I had her in my backpack. I showed them pictures. Like, I wanted people to know. But still, everyone just jumped on board the lie. And they're just like, no, you know, this is what we're doing. So a photographer was there. And there are some photographs of me. And I have not seen myself that livid since maybe I was 7. You know, just the look on my face of just utter disbelief, disappointment, annoyance, just all the things. My face was I was just like, why am I even here? Why am I holding this wreath? Why do I have this sand in my hand? Like, why? But I was too exhausted to do anything with it. So, yeah, they got buried. Weirdly, the guys who made the grave, which was a pure concrete grave, by the way, which was further just stupidness. They have this whole thing, like, if you come down on your own, they seem to think that you have money on you, and they're just like, oh, you need to pay me for this. I'm like, no, I might be foreign, but I'm not stupid. Like, my uncle has paid for this. If you have issues, you go deal with him. Oh, but nothing. I know how this plays out.
Kenyan version of window washers.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like, we've done something for you. We've done this extra thing. Do you really like it? Yeah. So
how did we talked a little bit about this last time, but how did you find your people in the midst of all this? This is just, I mean,
I just stayed true to who I am. And, you know, like you were saying before, like, you know, the worry that one can have of trying to kind of take a step out from the procession and just being a little bit different. I'm a professional at doing that. So much so, like, you know, if I'm in a place that I'm uncomfortable, either I'm quiet because I know I'll eventually be able to leave, or if I'm there for a while, I just walk around and I look at people. And, you know, it was kind of my moment just with the funeral because it was my mother. You know, certain people would look and look away or whatever, and certain other people would just sit there and just be like, hey, and they do a weird wave. I don't know why it's a weird wave, but for some reason it's the weird wave where I'm like, you're one of mine.
That's how you tell?
Oh, yeah. Just so one of my aunties, she's also kind of weirdly like cast out a little bit further out, and everyone was just saying weird things about her, and I'm just like, you guys are weird. Why are you doing this? And she was the one that I sat with the most, and I cried on her shoulder and just gave her a big hug, and I finally managed to like break down for a little bit. And she hasn't been in my life that much, but like it just felt like seeing an old friend again, out of all the other relatives and everything who have been there, but they've all got this like vibe underneath them that I really didn't like. Because being quiet reveals a lot about people really quickly. Yeah. Especially their drinking habits. So, you know, watching, well, I wasn't drinking, and they're just like, have some whiskey, and I'm like, it's Jameson. I don't want Jameson. Like, it's gross. Like, where's the Lefroy?
Oh my gosh.
But
you're my kind of people.
Yes, like we spoke about this before.
Yes, we did.
Single malt whiskeys, but yeah, they're all into Jameson, and I'm just like, I don't want to wake up with like more hate and regret in my head and a hangover. You know, give me something better. But they didn't have anything, and I just wasn't drinking. And then I had one, and then everyone chilled out. It was literally because I wasn't drinking, everyone else felt like, you know, there was a problem. And they're just getting more and more antsy. Yeah, it's very common. There is a
psychological component to that too, because it's almost like you're separating yourself as an outsider in that.
Mm-hmm. And so, but it's not even a parallel outsider. It's like, I'm above you because I don't drink, kind of thing.
Sure. No, I'm with you.
Yeah.
There's a point of that. I mean, in these situations or any situation in life to where all eyes are on you, you almost have to conform in a way so that other people can feel comfortable.
Yep.
You know, but there's a way to do that to where you don't lose yourself either in the process or don't compromise what you stand for. So what's one drink in Jameson? I mean, it's still gross. But
I did not enjoy it. I think I went and got some water at one point, but even then, I just think I just very gracefully just put the glass down somewhere. And
they're never going to sponsor the show now, by the way. But
it's fine. Lefroy, if you're listening, hook us up.
Or Macallan, I would go with that too. But hey,
good shout. But yeah, so you know, finding your people is just. I find rather than rushing around trying to find someone, just being very still and looking at who's looking at you, why they're looking at you, what they're doing, do they feel comfortable with you, do they not feel comfortable with you, is way more telling than going, hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? And everyone's just like, fine, go away, you know? So that's how I found my people that way.
That's great. Where can everyone find you again?
So I'm on the social medias. So Facebook, Shiggimus, or if you do Shiggi Pakter,
I love that.
On Facebook, I'm there. Instagram, Elshig, ELSHIG, and Twitter, Elshig as well.
And your podcast is launching?
Yes, it's coming out on my birthday, the 2nd of January.
Awesome.
Whenever you're listening to this. So it'll be launching then. I'm just getting back into the swing of everything. So lots of psychology talks and hopefully talking to other people as well.
Nice. Everyone needs to follow Shiggi. Everyone needs to subscribe to her podcast too. Why? Because I'm going to, and I can't wait to hear all of your other insight. This was great.
There's a lot coming because I took a break over lockdown just because I felt like there wasn't really much to talk about. But then I realized, no, there's a lot mental cleaning. So I've got a few episodes that I'm already recording. So
lovely
times.
Well, do that. Follow Shiggi, listen to her podcast, and I'd love to be a guest on your show. You can drill me the same way I drilled you. Cool?
No, definitely. It's gonna happen. Don't you worry.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks again, Shiggi.
Thank you.
What's shaking? Thank you for joining me on the All In Podcast. Click the subscribe button and smash that bell for notifications. Text me, 312-535-8520. Follow me on social media at Mr. Rick Jordan. See you next episode. I am Rick Jordan and I approve this message.